What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, and of course I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40K. In this one I will be going over the newest 10th edition lore that pits the Tyranids against the Imperium, and it's not looking good for the Imperium. So a few days ago I did a lore excerpt on some Leviathan lore that pit the newest Tyranid bioform, the Norn's Emissary, going up against multiple forces of the Imperium. More specifically, it was targeting none other than one of the High Lords, Lord Solar Leontis, and his retinue, which consisted of a bunch of guardsmen and Ministorum members who had las guns, plasma weapons, power weapons, etc. But the real threat to the Norn Emissary here wasn't these lowly warriors. It was none other than the Adeptus Custodes. These were the real bodyguards for Lord Solar, and these guys were immensely powerful. There's no doubt about it that the Custodes are the pinnacle of power, of expertise, of perfection when it comes to warriors of the Imperium. They were the Emperor's bodyguards, so you know these guys mean business. They're stronger than Space Marines. However, they're not quite up to Primarch level. Or are they? So let's go ahead and figure out the power scaling for Norn's Emissary by looking at the Custodes and how they fare against the Primarchs. But before that, I do want to say that the Norn's Emissary in the excerpt that I talked about a few days ago, it went off against a squad of either 5 or 6 Adeptus Custodes. So one Norn Emissary was taken out by 5 or 6 Custodes, one of them being none other than Valorous. Valorous is pretty much the strongest Custode we have right now, except for maybe Constantine Valdor. But Valorous is the top of the top. This guy means business, and he's the one that dealt the final killing blow on the Norn's Emissary. But before that, the Emissary ended up maiming a Custode by chopping his arm off, killing another one by literally bisecting him in half. And that's just the beginning. The next one, he ends up kicking his head clean off of his shoulders. And then he pummels another to death. And at the very end, he ends up snapping a Custode's neck with a flick of its tail. So right then and there, we have 5 confirmed kills and 1 maim by having his arm cut off. I don't think this one was one of the other ones that died, but if it was, he survived against 4 or 5 Custodes. And if you look at the squad, because they were in a Stormhawk gunship, so 5 or 6 Custodes could fit in there. And at the very end of it all, it was Trajan Valorous and one other Custode that survived. But yeah, that's crazy when you look at it. It took out 4 or 5 Custodes, and it did a bunch of damage to the other ones. So let's go ahead and see how these Custodes fare against Primarchs to see if the Norn's Emissary is indeed Primarch level. So in the novel, The Wolf Time, we have a conversation by Colcan, who's trying to go through a scenario to see if he can best a Primarch. Thrice more, Colcan forced himself to run the scenario, and yet no matter how well prepared he thought himself, even when he positioned himself within blade's reach of Vichelin, he could not land a blow upon Guilliman before his ascent began. "What is your point?" demanded the custodian. He flexed his thoughts, pausing the simulation in the face of Colcan's attempt to restart it. "What is yours?" countered the tribune. "Why do you hesitate to do what must be done?" The scene molded itself afresh, with Colcan where Viken had been. The tribune's blade whirled a split second after the scene started to replay. Guilliman's head tumbled from his neck, severed neatly along the same line where the scar from his previous mortal wound had been dealt. The armored body collapsed loudly upon the lowest steps. "You struck before he presented a threat," said Vichelin. "A preemptive blow. So in this excerpt, we see that a Custode can indeed take out a Primarch if he attacks first and before Guilliman, or any Primarch for that matter, knows it's coming. So if it's a surprise attack, a single Custode presumably can take out a Primarch. Now this one doesn't really hold too much weight for me, because again, it was a scenario and he acted before the scenario, or the Primarch in this scenario knew what was going on. So I kind of see it like cheating, but at the end of the day, when you're in a fight to the death, everything is fair. So let's go ahead and look at this other excerpt from the Godblight novel. Most impressive of all was Starachus, Tribune, Actuarius, Maldavar, Colquhoun, and his custodians, their great height made yet more imposing by their tall, conical helms. They included 3 Alaris Terminators, 5 Wardens, and 2 squads of 5 Custodians of lesser rank. Lesser was a subjective term, for every one of them was the match of 100 mortal men, or a dozen Space Marines. They were second only to Guilliman himself in might. They could, together, perhaps beat him. So here we see that Guilliman himself is thinking that perhaps if these 19 Custodians of varying might were to fight him, he may lose. Emphasis on the may. So basically 20 Custodians against 1 Primarch with no surprise attacks. Just, they both know the fight's about to begin. They both know what they're up against. Perhaps Guilliman could lose here. But that's a little subjective, because when you look at the Primarchs during the Heresy, for example, we have Corvus Corax going up against armies of just Iron Warriors, and he pretty much comes out on top. So Guilliman here says that a single Adeptus Custodi is equivalent to about a dozen Space Marines, and here we have about 19 Custodians. So he's basically saying that about 120 Space Marines can take out a Primarch. Nah, I don't buy that at all. So it's just conjectured, subjective. It's pretty much just giving us a representation of who, what, where, how a Primarch can do against Custodians, and indirectly against Space Marines, and I guess even more so indirectly against the Norn's Emissary. So I think what we have here is a Tyranid bioform that has mutated itself to fight not only against Space Marines and win, but also against the Custodes and win. So I think this is what happens when the Tyranids have Custode biomass that they've been ingesting and putting into their own bioforms, and this is what we have here. So really scary. I wonder what type of monstrosities can come out if a Primarch's DNA gets snatched up by the hive mind. That will probably bring the end to the Imperium. But let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think about these excerpts from Godblight and the Wolf Time? Do you think Custodes can take out a Primarch, be it by surprise or a 20-on-1 battle? And what do you think about the Norn's Emissary? Are they Primarch level or just Custode level? Let me know down below, and we'll keep the lore coming. As always, guys, if you want to help support us here at One Mind Syndicate, a super thanks would be greatly appreciated. If not, you can support us over on our Patreon page for a simple $1 a month. And of course, liking, commenting, and subscribing helps a ton to the channel. Thanks again for watching. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Oh, I used to put my sweet